My sons pretended not to know me. When I served their lunch at school, so I served them a reality check at graduation. This is my story, my journey from invisibility to power, from shame to pride. Subscribe to this channel and comment where you're watching from. I woke up at 4:30 that morning, same as always. The darkness outside my window still thick as molasses, the apartment quiet, except for the hum of the ancient refrigerator. 4 months since Carl's funeral, and I still reached for his warmth beside me before remembering. Some habits die harder than others. The pile of bills on my nightstand hadn't gotten any smaller overnight. Hospital cleaning job wasn't cutting it, not with the twins' senior year expenses and the partial scholarships that covered just enough to keep us scrambling for the rest. I picked up the framed photo of Marcus and Zoe, my miracle babies at 45, when the doctors said it couldn't happen. The reason Carl stayed clean for 12 whole years before the streets called him back. "We gonna make it?" I whispered to their teenage faces, frozen in time before everything got so complicated, before they started acting like they came from money instead of the South Side. That's when Destiny from the hospital break room popped into my mind. Westfield Academy looking for cafeteria staff, she'd mentioned yesterday. Pays better than here, and they got benefits. Westfield Academy, the same fancy school where my babies got in on academic scholarships, the same place they disappeared into every morning, coming home with new ways of talking, new expectations I couldn't meet. That night, I set the table nice, made Carl's famous gumbo, the twins' favorite. My heart felt lighter than it had in months. "I got some good news," I said, watching their faces. "I got a second job, at your school, in the cafeteria." I smiled wide. Means I can help with them school expenses, and we can see each other during the day. The silence hit like a physical thing. Zoe's fork clattered against her plate. "You're gonna work in our school? Serving food?" Her voice climbed higher with each word. "It's good money, baby, and benefits too." "Mom, you can't!" She looked panicked, her eyes darting to Marcus for backup. My son's face had gone hard as stone. "Do whatever you want," he said, voice cold as January. "But don't expect us to talk to you there." My smile froze on my face. "What you mean by that?" "I mean," Marcus said, pushing back from the table, "don't come up to us. Don't act like you know us." He stood up. "We worked too hard to get where we are." "Where you are?" My voice shook. "And where exactly is that, Marcus? Somewhere better than—" He cut himself off, but his eyes finished the sentence, sweeping across our small apartment, across my worn uniform hanging by the door. Across me. Something cracked inside my chest as he walked away. Not my heart that had been breaking in small pieces since they started high school. No, this was different. This was the shell I'd built around my pride. I watched Zoe follow her brother, neither looking back at the meal I'd spent 3 hours preparing. The gumbo Carl taught me to make during better days. Somewhere better, I whispered to the empty room. Then what? Then who? The question hung in the air like smoke. Impossible to wave away. First day at Westfield felt like stepping onto another planet. All marble floors and wood paneling, students in clothes that cost more than my monthly rent. The cafeteria staff, all black and brown faces, moved like ghosts, invisible until needed, forgotten once the task was done. "Keep your head down and don't make eye contact with the parents," warned Gloria, who'd been working the line for 15 years. "They look through you anyway, but it's easier if you don't see it happening." I nodded, tying my hairnet over my freshly done braids. "I'm just here for the paycheck, and to keep an eye on my babies." Lunch period came with a flood of teenagers, their voices bouncing off the high ceilings. I scanned the crowd, heart jumping when I spotted Zoe's pink headband, then Marcus's tall frame. They moved with the popular kids, laughing, completely at ease in this world that made my skin prickle. My chest swelled with pride, seeing them so comfortable here, even as something cold settled in my stomach. They belonged in ways I never would. When Marcus's group approached the line, my pulse quickened. He didn't see me at first, caught up in some joke with a blonde boy in a lacrosse jersey. Then our eyes met. The recognition flashed across his face, quickly replaced by something else. Something hard. He looked away so fast it was like he'd been burned. When he reached my station, he kept his eyes on the food. "Just the pasta. No sauce. No, please. No, thank you. No, hey, Mom. Nothing. Here you go, baby," I said softly, serving him like I would any other student. He turned away without a word, and I watched him rejoin his friends, shoulders relaxed again once he'd escaped me. Later came Zoe's turn. She took longer to approach, letting other girls go ahead while she pretended to text on her phone. When she finally reached me, her eyes stayed fixed on her tray. "Salad," she whispered, like even speaking to me might contaminate her. "Dressing?" I asked, like I didn't know my own daughter preferred ranch. She shook her head quickly, moving on. That night, I scrubbed the kitchen floor on my hands and knees, the ache in my back nothing compared to the one in my chest. The twins stayed in their rooms, doors closed, laughing at videos on their phones like nothing had happened. I wrung the mop into the bucket, watching the dirty water swirl. Invisible at work, invisible at home. The story of my life these days. But something was shifting inside me. A slow burn starting in my belly. If they wanted me invisible, they'd soon learn some things. Once seen, can never be unseen again. 2 weeks into my cafeteria job, I'd gotten used to the routine. Wake at 4:30, prep breakfast by 6:30, lunch service from 11 to 1, clean up until 2:30, then home to start my evening hospital shift. My feet throbbed constantly, but the double paycheck made the pain worthwhile. Gloria had become my cafeteria mama, showing me the ropes and sharing homemade empanadas during our breaks. Today, she caught me watching Zoe across the dining hall. "That your girl?" she asked, following my gaze. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Pretty. Looks just like you around the eyes." "She don't want to look nothing like me these days." Gloria patted my hand. "Kids forget where they come from sometimes, especially here. This place makes them think money is the same thing as worth." We were wiping down the serving line when I overheard Zoe's voice from just beyond the kitchen doorway. My ears pricked up like a mama fox sensing danger. "My mom's in Europe right now," she was saying to a circle of white girls in expensive highlights and pearl earrings, "closing a big deal for her cosmetics company." I froze, rag in hand, as she continued spinning her fantasy. "She travels all the time, Paris, London, Milan. That's why she couldn't make it to the parent mixer." The lies poured out smooth as honey, while I stood literally 15 feet away in a hairnet and food-stained apron, serving lasagna. Later that afternoon, my body moved on autopilot toward the tables where Marcus sat with his basketball teammates. Some reckless impulse drove me forward, a smile plastered on my face. "Marcus, honey, I forgot to give you movie money for tonight." I held out a $20 bill, a peace offering. The entire table went silent. 8 pairs of teenage eyes locked on us. Marcus looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "I think you've confused me with someone else." The blood rushed to my face as one of his friends snickered. "I don't know you," he added, each word a nail in my heart. "Yeah, lunch lady's trippin'," another boy muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. I stood there, the 20 still extended, my hand suddenly too heavy to lower. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, too bright, exposing everything. "My mistake," I finally managed, my voice a ghost of itself. I backed away, dignity in tatters. That night, I sat alone in the dark of our apartment, still in my uniform, too tired to even change. When I closed my eyes, all I could see was Marcus's face, not as the baby I'd nursed, or the child I'd raised, but as a stranger looking through me like I was nothing but air. "I don't know you." The words echoed in my mind as I fingered the framed photo of our family, taken back when Carl was still alive, before the twins started pulling away, before they started becoming ashamed of who they were, of who I was. Something hot and fierce welled up inside me. Not just hurt anymore, but something else, something with teeth. I found refuge in the school kitchen after hours, crying silently while prepping tomorrow's meal. The industrial-sized mixers and refrigerators hummed around me, the only witnesses to my broken heart. "Mrs. Washington?" I jumped, quickly wiping my eyes with my sleeve. Dr. James Bennett, the assistant principal, stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the hallway light. "I'm almost finished here," I said, straightening my spine. "Just getting ahead on tomorrow's bread rolls." He stepped closer, concern etching lines around his eyes. "Been meaning to tell you how much the students are enjoying your cooking. First time I've seen teenagers asking for seconds on vegetables." I managed a weak smile. "My grandmama's recipes. She could make cardboard taste good." He chuckled, then studied me more carefully. "Everything all right? You seem—" "I'm fine." I cut him off, then immediately regretted my sharpness. "Sorry, long day." "I remember you, you know," he said, leaning against the counter. From the neighborhood. You lived on Oakley, right? 3 houses down from my auntie. The memories surfaced like a bubble. Miss Perline, with all them cats? 7 cats and a parrot that cursed in Spanish. He grinned. Small world. Long way from the south side, I agreed. For both of us, he sighed. Only black administrator in this place. Sometimes feels like I'm speaking a different language than everyone else. Something in his voice, the familiar weight of it, loosened the knot in my chest. Your people know you here? I asked carefully. He understood immediately. My daughter graduated last year. He hesitated. She had her struggles with it, being from where we're from, but trying to fit in here. Later that night, alone in my bedroom, I pulled out the cedar chest from under my bed. Inside lay the fragments of my history photos, letters, my grandmother's handwritten recipe cards, stained with decades of use. Near the bottom, I found a letter my mother wrote me before she passed. The paper had yellowed with time, but her handwriting remained bold. Never let them take your dignity, Eleanor. It's the only thing nobody can touch without your permission. My fingers traced a photo of my grandmother in her domestic uniform, standing tall beside the white family she cooked for. Despite everything, her eyes held a fierce pride. I felt something stir inside me, a connection to these women who'd faced much worse than teenage rejection and still kept their heads high. I carried their blood, their strength. I stood before the mirror, really looking at myself for the first time in months. The grief had etched new lines around my eyes, and exhaustion had dimmed their light. But underneath, I saw my mother's cheekbones, my grandmother's determined jaw. They gonna learn, I whispered to my reflection. They gonna learn what real dignity looks like, even if it's the last thing I do. The day everything changed, I was mopping the administration wing after hours. My second job at Westfield night cleaning kept me at the school until nearly 10 p.m., but the extra money was worth it. Outside the principal's office, my mop caught on something. I moved the trash can to find a forgotten folder. Its contents spilled across the floor. As I gathered the papers, a familiar name jumped out. Marcus Washington, academic probation. Notice. My hands trembled as I read further. Both my children were in danger of losing their scholarships due to failing grades. The school had sent multiple notices, home notices I'd never seen. Another paper made my blood run cold, a printed email from the school counselor. In our sessions, both Marcus and Zoe have referenced their father working abroad and their mother being a corporate executive. Given the discrepancy with their actual family situation, I'm concerned about the pressure they feel to fabricate their background. I sank into the secretary's chair. The papers clutched to my chest. My babies hadn't just denied me, they'd created an entirely fictional life, ashamed of everything we were. The pain cut deeper than any rejection. They'd erased Carl's struggle and death, painted over our history with lies about business trips and executive meetings. I slipped the documents back into the folder and returned it to the desk. No point confronting them with stolen information. I needed something more powerful than accusations. At home, I found them hunched over textbooks at the kitchen table, an unusual sight lately. Despite their deception, they obviously cared about their grades, just not enough to tell the truth. You two all right? I asked, setting down my purse. You're studying awful hard tonight. They exchanged a quick glance before Zoe answered. Just a big test tomorrow. Looking at them so young, so desperate to belong, my anger softened into something more complicated. They weren't monsters. They were scared kids trying to navigate a world that made them feel they weren't enough. That night, I sat in bed with a notebook, creating a 3-phase plan. First, make my presence unavoidable. Second, rebuild the family pride they'd lost. And finally, force a moment of truth they couldn't ignore. Under Phase 1, undeniable presence, I wrote, stop being just the server. Become a force in the school. Under Phase 2, roots and wings, I noted, reconnect them to their family history. Show them where their strength comes from. For Phase 3, moment of truth, I simply wrote, public reckoning, lesson and redemption. I closed the notebook and slid it under my mattress. Tomorrow, everything would change. They thought I was invisible? I was about to become the most visible person in their world. When the parent-teacher conference night arrived, I came straight from my hospital shift, stopping at home only long enough to change into my one good dress, royal blue, with gold accents that brought out the warmth in my brown skin. I twisted my locks into an elegant updo and applied a touch of lipstick. Stepping into the school's grand hall, I felt the curious eyes of wealthy parents. Clearly, they were trying to figure out which prestigious family I belonged to. I spotted Marcus and Zoe across the room, their backs to me as they chatted with friends. When they turned and saw me, their expressions cycled from shock to horror to panic. A white man in an expensive suit approached me. "Excuse me," he said without really looking at me. "Could you bring some more coffee to the refreshment table?" Before I could answer, Dr. Bennett materialized beside me. "Mr. Calloway, have you met Eleanor Washington? She's one of our most valued team members and the mother of 2 of our brightest students." The man's face flushed red. I apologize for the misunderstanding." I smiled graciously. "No trouble at all. The coffee is on that table right over there." I pointed, then turned away, hearing Dr. Bennett's barely concealed chuckle. After most parents had left, I approached Dr. Bennett directly. "I know about my children's grades," I said quietly. His eyebrows rose. "I see. And how did you—" "A mother knows," I interrupted. "I want to help them improve, but I need time. They can't lose those scholarships." He studied me thoughtfully. "The committee usually doesn't offer extensions, but—" He sighed. "I'll give them 1 more semester to bring their grades up. But Mrs. Washington, they need to understand the seriousness of this situation." "Oh, they will," I promised. "Trust me on that." At home, the twins were unusually subdued, shooting me nervous glances across the living room. "You look nice tonight," Zoe offered cautiously. "Thank you, baby." "You didn't have to dress up just for a parent-teacher meeting," Marcus mumbled, not meeting my eyes. I smiled slightly. "Sometimes we need to remember how to stand tall, even when life tries to push us down." "What's that supposed to mean?" His voice held a defensive edge. "It means," I said, looking between them, "sometimes we need to fall to remember how to get back up." They exchanged worried glances, clearly wondering what I knew. I just smiled and headed to my bedroom, leaving them to wonder. That night, I pulled out old photo albums and started placing selected pictures around the apartment, my grandfather in his World War II uniform, my aunt at her college graduation, Carl and me on our wedding day, surrounded by family and friends, seeds planted, now to watch them grow. I enrolled in a community cooking course, refining skills passed down through generations. Soon, my special additions to the Westfield menu created buzz among students and staff. My Soul Food Wednesday chicken became legendary, with lines forming before the cafeteria even opened. Dr. Bennett noticed the change in the lunchroom atmosphere. "Mrs. Washington, whatever magic you're working in that kitchen, it's changing things around here. Students actually talk to the cafeteria staff now." "Food brings people together," I replied. "Always has. Would you consider helping with our cultural heritage event next month? We could use your expertise." I accepted immediately, knowing it was an event all students were required to attend, including my twins. Meanwhile, I reached out to family members and old friends, collecting stories, photographs, and documents about our rich history. I learned about Uncle Joseph, who'd marched with Dr. King and Selma, and Cousin Darlene, who'd been one of Chicago's first Black female professors. At home, I casually left these treasures around our apartment, old photographs on the coffee table, newspaper clippings on the kitchen counter, letters from ancestors on the refrigerator door. I noticed how Marcus and Zoe would examine these items when they thought I wasn't looking. One evening, I overheard them whispering in the hallway. "Did you know Great-Uncle Joe was at Selma?" Marcus asked. Awe evident in his voice. "And Grandma Eleanor worked 3 jobs to put Aunt Patricia through law school," Zoe added. The seeds were sprouting. I started experimenting with my grandmother's recipes in our kitchen, the apartment filled with smells that brought neighbors knocking, asking what I was cooking. "Just some old family recipes," I'd say. "Come on in and try some." Our quiet apartment became a gathering place on weekend afternoons. The twins initially retreated to their rooms, embarrassed by these impromptu gatherings, but gradually, the delicious smells and laughter drew them out. One Sunday, I noticed Marcus hovering in the kitchen doorway while I taught neighbor Miss Claudette how to make proper cornbread. "You need something, baby?" I asked. He hesitated. "Could you show me how to make that too?" Something warm unfurled in my chest as I handed him an apron. "Your great-grandma would be proud. She always said men should know their way around a kitchen." Later that week, I overheard Zoe on the phone with a friend, her voice animated. "My mom's making her famous peach cobbler tonight. The one that made Mrs. Jennings cry. It was so good." My mom. Two simple words I hadn't heard her say in months. That night, I added to my notebook, Phase 2 progressing. They're beginning to see our history as something valuable, not shameful. The transformation had begun subtle, but undeniable. My invisible presence was slowly taking solid form in their eyes again. A freak ice storm hit Chicago that January, forcing Westfield to dismiss early. Road conditions deteriorated so quickly that many students, including Marcus and Zoe, couldn't leave. With the power failing in most of the building, Dr. Bennett gathered everyone in the cafeteria, the only place with emergency generators. I immediately began taking inventory of our supplies. "We've got enough to feed everyone a hot meal," I told Dr. Bennett, "and the gas stoves will work even if the power goes completely." As students huddled at tables, I fired up the industrial stoves and started cooking. It wasn't part of my job description, but these kids, rich or poor, needed warmth and comfort. The smell of chicken and dumplings soon filled the air. I noticed Marcus and Zoe sitting with their friends, trying to ignore my presence while stealing glances my way. As I worked, I began talking, not loudly, but just enough for my voice to carry. I told stories as I cooked, not identifying them as personal history, but presenting them as community stories. During the Great Migration, I began, stirring the large pot. 6 million black folks left the South searching for a better life up north. There was this one family that walked all the way from Mississippi to Chicago because they couldn't afford train tickets. Students gradually grew quiet, listening. Even the teachers leaned in. They say the women were the backbone of that journey. They carried children on their hips, food in their aprons, and hope in their hearts. When the men wanted to turn back, the women just kept walking forward. I noticed Zoe watching me intently now, her friends forgotten. One particular woman, we'll call her May, she worked as a cook for rich white families in Chicago. They say she had to enter through the back door and couldn't eat the food she prepared. I paused, adding seasoning to the pot. But every night, she'd go home and cook the same fancy dishes for her own family, because she refused to believe her children deserved any less than those she served. A wealthy-looking girl sitting near Zoe raised her hand. "Did May ever tell the rich people off?" I smiled, stirring slowly. "No, honey. She didn't need to. She outlived them all, put 3 children through college, and died in a house she owned outright. Living well is the best response to people who think you're beneath them." As I served the meal, students thanked me by name. Even Marcus's basketball friends nodded respectfully. When one of Zoe's friends said, "You tell stories like my grandmother, Mrs. Washington," I caught a flicker of something in my daughter's eyes, not embarrassment, but a glimmer of pride. When the roads cleared enough for everyone to leave, the twins faced a dilemma: be seen getting a ride with the cafeteria lady or walk miles in freezing rain. Reluctantly, they slid into my old Toyota. The back seat remained silent until a passing truck splashed dirty slush toward our car. I swerved smoothly, avoiding the worst of it. "Thanks for picking us up," Marcus muttered, almost inaudible. Then, after a pause, "Mom." That single word, the first time he'd acknowledged me as his mother in public for months, was enough to warm me all the way home. The next morning, I found Marcus and Zoe huddled at the kitchen table, a school letter between them. They were arguing in hushed tones about forging a signature when they noticed me watching. "Y'all look concerned," I said calmly, pouring my coffee. "Something about scholarships at risk, maybe? Or explaining to the counselor why your father is working overseas when he actually died of an overdose right here in Chicago?" Their faces went slack with shock. "You've been going through our stuff?" Marcus accused, recovering first. "No," I replied evenly. "I was cleaning the principal's office, my second job, in case you forgot when I found the letters you've been hiding and emails about the lies you've been telling." Zoe burst into tears while Marcus's face hardened with anger. "You don't understand what it's like," he hissed, "being one of the only black kids in that school. No one would respect us if they knew our mom serves their lunch and our dad died from drugs." I set my coffee down carefully, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. "No, baby, you don't understand what it's like watching my children who I raised to have pride in themselves pretend to be people they're not." My voice remained calm but firm. "Your father didn't die working overseas. He died because systems failed him, because addiction is a disease, and because being a black man in this country can break even the strongest spirits. That's our truth, and running from it doesn't make it any less true." Marcus looked away, jaw tight. Zoe sobbed quietly, her shoulders shaking. And yes, I knew about the scholarships, I continued. I spoke with Dr. Bennett. You have one more semester to improve your grades, a chance you wouldn't have if I wasn't serving lunch at your school. I grabbed my purse and keys. I have to get to work. We'll talk more later. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Zoe ask Marcus in a small voice, "What are we going to do?" For the first time in months, I felt something close to hope. The truth was finally on the table. Now we could start rebuilding if they were willing. During my shift, I noticed subtle changes. Marcus nodded slightly when he passed me in the hallway. Zoe paused at my station, making brief eye contact as I served her. Dr. Bennett stopped by during my break. "Everything okay with your family situation?" "Getting there," I replied. "Sometimes the hardest conversations are the most necessary ones." "The twins seem different today," he observed. "More present." I nodded. Truth has a way of waking people up. That evening, I came home to find the apartment cleaner than usual. The twins had washed dishes and even started dinner, a simple pasta dish, but it was the thought that counted. We ate in awkward silence until Marcus finally spoke. "We should have told you about the scholarship warnings." I nodded, waiting. "And," he swallowed hard, "we shouldn't have lied about Dad, or about you." "Why did you?" I asked softly. Not accusatory, just seeking understanding. Zoe looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "It was easier than explaining, than being different, than being pitied. There's no shame in where we come from," I said. "The shame is in denying it." They didn't argue. It was a start, a small crack in the wall they'd built between us. Not forgiveness or reconciliation yet, but something even more important: truth. Weeks passed with a cautious new dynamic in our home. The twins studied harder, their grades slowly improving. At school, small acknowledgments replaced complete avoidance, Marcus occasionally nodding in the hallway, Zoe stopping for brief conversations at my station. One afternoon, Dr. Bennett called me into his office. "The staff has elected you to speak at graduation," he announced. "As our employee representative." I blinked in surprise. "Me? But I've only been here a few months. In that time, you've transformed our cafeteria into a place where students actually want to be." He smiled. "Your impact hasn't gone unnoticed." "I don't know if my own children would be comfortable with that," I admitted. He leaned forward. "Maybe that's exactly why you should do it." That evening, I found Marcus and Zoe at the kitchen table with college application forms, a mix of community colleges and affordable state schools. "We're being more realistic," Zoe explained, not meeting my eyes. I set down my purse and joined them. "I received an invitation today," I said, telling them about the graduation speech. They exchanged nervous glances. "What are you going to say?" Marcus asked, clearly worried about public exposure. "The truth," I replied simply. "Our truth, about our family, our journey, and what it means to have dignity, even when the world tries to strip it away." Zoe sighed heavily. "You're going to humiliate us in front of the whole school, aren't you? Your revenge for everything we did." I looked directly into my daughter's eyes. Revenge would be telling only the parts that make you look bad. Truth includes your courage, your resilience, and the fact that you come from generations of people who never gave up. For the first time, they seemed to truly listen. "Tell me about Great Uncle Joe," Marcus asked hesitantly. "The one who was at Selma?" I spent the evening sharing family stories. They'd never heard about ancestors who survived slavery, grandparents who fought discrimination, and relatives who created businesses, earned degrees, and built communities despite every obstacle. As they listened, I could see something awakening in their eyes, recognition that they were heirs to a legacy of strength, not shame. "Why didn't you tell us these stories before?" Zoe asked. "I thought I was," I replied, "in how I lived, in how I raised you." But sometimes stories need words to be understood. Before they went to bed, Marcus hesitated in the hallway. "Mom, we're sorry. For everything." I nodded, accepting but not dismissing. "I know, baby, but sorry's just the beginning. Now we rebuild." In my room that night, I worked on my graduation speech, carefully weaving our family's struggle with the larger story of dignity, identity, and the courage to be authentic. Not to shame my children, but to lift them up, to show them and everyone else the power of owning your truth. As I wrote, I felt the presence of my mother, my grandmother, and all the strong women in my lineage standing behind me. This speech wasn't just for Marcus and Zoe, it was for all of them too, for all of us who had ever been made to feel invisible. Graduation day arrived bright and clear. The auditorium buzzed with proud families in their Sunday best. From my place on the stage, I could see Marcus and Zoe among the graduates, tension visible in their postures, but no longer hostility. I wore my cafeteria uniform beneath a beautiful African print dress my mother had sewn decades ago, a statement of both identities, the work that sustained us and the heritage that defined us. When Dr. Bennett introduced me as a woman who has nourished not just bodies but souls at Westfield, I approached the podium with steady steps. Today, I began, my voice clear and strong, I stand before you not just as an employee of this institution, but as a mother. I paused, letting the words settle. Mother of two extraordinary young people graduating today, Marcus and Zoe Washington. A murmur rippled through the crowd as classmates turned to look at my children. I saw Marcus sit up straighter, not shrinking as I'd feared. Our journey to this moment hasn't been straight or easy, I continued. We've known loss, hardship, and yes, shame. Not the shame of who we are, but the shame that comes from trying to be something we're not. I shared our family story not with embarrassment, but with ringing pride. I spoke of generations of Black women who cleaned, cooked, and cared for others so their children could have opportunities. I honored Carl's memory, acknowledging his addiction while celebrating his love and the years of sobriety he maintained for his family. Some might see just a woman serving food, I said, my hand touching my uniform beneath my dress. But when I look in the mirror, I see a lineage of strength. I see sacrifice with purpose. I see dignity that cannot be diminished by the work we do, but only by how much we allow others to define our worth. I looked directly at my children. I am mother to two young people who, like all of us, have made mistakes, who sometimes forgot who they are and where they came from. But I am also mother to two young people who have the courage to face truth, acknowledge their errors, and grow from them. This direct reference to their actions caused visible discomfort, but I also saw something else in their expressions, a dawning recognition, perhaps even respect. I addressed the entire class. As you leave these halls today, remember this: never be ashamed of who you are or where you come from. True education isn't just about facts and figures, it's about honoring your history while writing your future. As I returned to my seat, I noticed how some classmates looked at Marcus and Zoe differently, not with mockery as I'd feared, but with a new respect, not for the lies they'd told, but for the truth they now faced. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photos, Marcus and Zoe approached me slowly. They didn't rush into my arms as I might have secretly hoped, but there was something different in their eyes. Your speech was intense, Marcus said, his voice a mixture of embarrassment and reluctant admiration. It was the truth, I replied simply. You could have completely humiliated us, Zoe said softly. And what lesson would that have taught? That humiliating others is acceptable? That revenge matters more than dignity? Dr. Bennett joined us, interrupting the moment. Mrs. Washington, the scholarship committee was impressed with your children's great improvement this semester. He handed me an envelope. It's not a full scholarship to an elite university, but these are strong recommendations and contacts for financial aid programs at the state schools they've chosen. He turned to the twins. Your mother's advocacy made a significant difference. You're fortunate to have her in your corner. As he walked away, I saw my children truly seeing me perhaps for the first time in years, not just as their embarrassing mother who served food, but as a woman of strength and dignity who fought for them even when they rejected her. That evening, I prepared a special dinner using my grandmother's recipes. I set the table with our family's best dishes china that had been passed down for generations. After a moment's hesitation, Marcus and Zoe joined me in the kitchen, silently beginning to help without being asked. I don't think I ever really heard the story of how you and Dad met, Zoe said as she chopped vegetables, clearly trying to rebuild a bridge. As we prepared the meal together, I shared stories not just about Carl and our relationship, but about the generations before us. The dinner wasn't a boisterous celebration. There was still too much healing needed for that. But it was a beginning. After dinner, Marcus helped wash dishes, something he rarely did before. So this cooking club Dr. Bennett mentioned, he began, seeming genuinely interested. You gonna teach people to make that mac and cheese everyone at school keeps talking about? I smiled. Maybe, but I was thinking of something bigger. documenting our family and community stories through food, feeding the soul, recipes and stories of resilience. I could help with the digital part, Zoe offered tentatively. Make a website, maybe, with videos of you cooking and telling the stories. I'd like that, I said, feeling a cautious peace settle over me. There was no instant resolution to years of internalized shame and pain that would take time. But there was a beginning. My revenge hadn't been to humiliate them, but to force them to face the truth about our family and, more importantly, about themselves. 2 months later, I stood in the doorway of our apartment, watching my children prepare for their first day of community college. They'd both received partial scholarships, not to elite universities, but to solid programs that would give them foundations to build on. Marcus adjusted his collar, looking more like his father than ever. "How do I look?" he asked, actually meeting my eyes. "Like a Washington," I replied, strong and proud. Zoe emerged from her room in a dress she'd made herself, incorporating fabric patterns from my African dress. "The website got another 100 subscribers yesterday," she announced. "People love your story about Grandma's secret ingredient in her sweet potato pie." "Your grandmother always said the most important ingredient was dignity," I told them. "The courage to put your whole self into whatever you do, no matter who's watching." As they left for school, I noticed the change in their postures, heads higher, shoulders straighter. Not because they were pretending to be something they weren't, but because they were finally embracing who they truly were. Later that day, in the Westfield cafeteria, where I now ran the cultural cooking program, I overheard a new student ask Zoe, who was helping with our after-school workshop, "Is that your mom?" Without hesitation, she replied, "Yes, that's my mother. She's teaching me how to make her famous peach cobbler, a recipe that's been in our family for 5 generations." The simple words spoken with clear pride were worth more than any apology could ever be. My mother was right. Dignity isn't something anyone can take from you without permission. Sometimes we loan it out too cheaply, but it's never truly gone, just waiting for us to reclaim it, dust it off, and wear it like the crown it is. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story in the comments. Your journey might inspire another queen.